My name is Matthew Kalamane, and I am the writer and director of the horror feature film entitled Grinn. I was lucky enough to be able to shoot the film on the very location that inspired its genesis, so to speak. Event happened, of course, when I found myself home alone on the weekend. My parents were not in. My brother was home. My parents were not. My brother was in his room, the door was closed, but I could hear him pounding away at a video game controller, kind of yelling at the screen, and I could hear the video game itself being played. Anyway, my friend called, I picked up, and we were more or less just talking about what we were going to do the next day, where we were going to go. So I ended the phone conversation with my friend in the kitchen, and I heard what I can only describe as a high-pitched squeak or squeal or ring of some kind. But as the phone conversation ended, I realized that the pitch was still there. It sounded like it was coming from somewhere inside the house, and every room that I went to kind of investigate the sound was exactly the same. Like, I couldn't identify where in the house it was coming from, but just that it was coming from somewhere in the house. So I found myself in my room when the phone rang again, and I went to get it, only it wasn't in the kitchen where I left it. It was in the bathroom, which was right outside my door. So, being confused, I picked it up and answered it, and there was nobody there. And so I gave it about a minute and then hung up, and as I hung up, I started realizing that there was a very loud dragging sound coming from the roof. And then it occurred to me that was probably why I couldn't identify the piercing sound, because it was coming from every room of the house equally. It wasn't coming from the house, it was coming from the attic. I followed it through the entire house and ended up in my parents' room, and in my parents' room, the dragging stopped. It seemed like maybe the animal or whatever it was left, and I gave it a minute, nothing happened, and so I decided to flop on to the bed like I normally did, just for fun. And that's when I interacted with an object that was in the waterbed mattress. I got the feeling that it was about the size and shape of a human figure. And so I leapt out of bed, the waterbed settled, and there was a knock at the door. I got up, I went through the living room, I got to the front door, asked who was it, nobody answered. I peeked through the window, there was nobody there. I answered the door. Nobody at the door. So I close the door and lock it, and it's about this point where my brother starts yelling from the next room. Not yelling, scared yelling, but just yelling for me to come check something out in the video game that he has he just discovered. I marched in there basically to, one, find out what he wanted, and two, to kind of give him a piece of my mind. And when I walked in the door, light was out, TV was off, the bed was made, the controller was actually wrapped up and unplugged and sitting on the console. He wasn't there. Phone rang again. And so I raced really quickly through the hallway, living room, and back into the kitchen to pick up the phone. It was my friend. Knock, knock, knock. There was a knock at the door again. Now, I'm in the kitchen, which is right next to the front door, so I remember leaping toward the window, and I ripped the curtains out of the way, and there was nobody there. And I'm like, okay. I told my friend, hey, something's going on. I'm hearing things. I don't know what's going on. And he's like, don't answer the door. Don't answer the door. You can't answer the door. And I said, I'm going to answer the door because it doesn't look like there's anybody there. So I glanced again. Nobody there. Opened the door. Nobody there. Again. One of my habits when I was young and would talk on the phone, mainly for privacy because of the house, I used to walk around in the front yard while on the phone instead of in the house. And I found myself sort of staring off into space before I went into the house, and then it occurred to me that the thing I was staring off into space at was actually a large black pair of eyes that were looking at me. It was only the porch light, which was 60 feet away behind me. We were a good distance away. He was in my own shadow. And he had a huge smile that was inhumanly large. Now, what ended up happening was I had this feeling like maybe he didn't realize that I had noticed him despite me staring directly at him. So what I did is I turned around, turned my back to him, and through willpower alone, walked calmly and slowly back to the house. Because I felt like if I ran, he would have chased me down and caught me. I got inside, I shut the door, I locked it, and I barricaded myself in my room for the entire rest of the night. And those were basically the events, that single night's worth of events that inspired Grinn, the feature film, to be made. Ultimately, I'm happy to present it to you, and I hope you find it terrifying, and I hope you enjoy it.